The heat held to the plains, like a hand that wouldn't let go. 1887, late summer, northern New Mexico territory. The air was brittle with dust and the scent of dry sage, the kind that scraped the back of a man's throat when he breathed too deep. Cole Mercer rode slow, one boot loose in the stirrup, his horse's hide darkened by sweat. The sun leaned low, spilling copper light over a land that looked both empty and watchful. He kept his eyes on the trail, thinking of a gate hinge that needed mending before night, and a water trough that might run dry if the wind didn't change. But just as the ridge curved, he saw movement, where no wind stirred. A small figure against the pale milepost, half swallowed by brush, too still to be waiting for anyone. He reined in. The leather creaked softly. A woman stood there, her dress the color of washed-out mint, dust grinding into the fabric. Her hands pressed against her ribs like she was holding herself in. Cole dismounted, boots sinking in the loose sand. She didn't lift her head right away, and when she did, the light caught the bruise along her jaw, faint but sure. "You hurt bad?" he asked, voice low. Her lips moved, cracked and dry. "No more pain," she whispered, though the words sounded more like wish than truth. He didn't answer. Words like that were too fragile for the open air. Instead, he pulled the canteen from his saddle horn and offered it out. She hesitated, then took it with both hands. Her fingers were scraped raw, the nails caked with dust. Cole watched her drink, the small sound of water on her throat almost out of place in all that silence. He noticed her shoes, one missing a lace, the other torn at the toe. Whoever she was, she'd walked a long way. The mare flicked an ear, restless. Cole's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the trail bled into glare. Nothing moved out there, but something in the air made him scan twice. "You can ride," he said finally. She blinked, like she hadn't expected kindness to come in plain speech. "I'll walk. You won't make a mile." He reached out slow, giving her time to step back if she wanted. She didn't. His hand found her arm, thin, cold through the fabric. He lifted her into the saddle, sideways, careful not to pull her ribs. When he swung up behind her, she stiffened, then went still. He kept a space between them, enough for her to breathe. They rode west. The light bent lower, turning the grass gold at its tips. Dust rose behind them, soft as smoke. Her breathing hitched now and then, but she made no sound. Once, when the mare stumbled on a rut, her hand caught his knee for balance. It stayed there a second longer than needed. Ahead, the land began to dip, and far off, a line of cottonwoods marked where Cole's spread began. Smoke lifted from a chimney, thin, steady, home. The smell of pine kindling reached them even before the fence line. He slowed near the porch, the boards casting long shadows. "You can rest inside," he said. "Ain't much, but it's clean." She looked at the door, then at him, suspicion flickering like a reflex learned hard. "Why?" "Because you're here," he said simply. "That's enough." When she tried to dismount, her knees buckled. Cole caught her without thinking, one arm firm around her waist. She tensed, waiting for something that didn't come. He steadied her and stepped back. Inside, the air smelled of coffee gone cold and the faint resin of pine logs. He lit the lamp. Its small flame turned the room honey-colored, catching dust in the air. She sank into the nearest chair, both hands still clutching her cid. "Name's Cole," he said, setting a tin cup of water before her. She nodded, but didn't give hers. Outside, the light faded fast. The horizon burned once, then went dark. Somewhere far off, a single hoofbeat echoed on hardpan. Faint, deliberate, gone before it could be named. Cole stood by the window, listening. The plains had a way of keeping secrets. Until morning. Night came slow, settling over the plains like cooled ash. The lamp on Cole's table threw a narrow circle of amber light, soft enough to hide the roughness of the walls. Mira sat in that light, her shoulders drawn in, the tin cup held close to her chest. The smell of pine smoke clung to the air, faintly sweet, mixing with the sharp scent of dust and iron from his tools left by the door. Cole poured hot water from the kettle into a basin, steam curling like breath. He tore a clean strip from an old shirt, the fabric thin from years of wash. "You mind?" he asked, but not as command. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the door as if measuring the distance to it, then shook her head. Her voice came quieter than a whisper. "Do what you have to." He crouched beside her, the lamplight climbing the edge of her cheek. When his fingers brushed the edge of the torn dress, she flinched. Not from pain, but from memory. Cole paused, waiting until her breath steadied, then pressed the damp cloth gently over the bruise along her ribs. The skin was mottled purple and yellow, healing but tender. "I've seen worse," he murmured. Her mouth tightened. "So have I." They stayed silent after that. The only sound, the slow drip of water from the cloth. He tied the bandage loose enough for her to breathe, then straightened. "That'll hold a while." Mira glanced around the room. The plain table, the small stove, the coat hung neat by the door. "You live here alone?" "Mostly. My brother was here a spell. Went east when the cattle thinned." Her fingers traced the seam of the bandage absently. "You ever get used to it?" she asked softly. "The quiet?" Cole's smile came slow. "You don't get used to it," he said. "You just learn what kind it is." Outside, the wind picked up, brushing dry grass against the window like a restless whisper. Mira's eyes shifted toward the sound, the faint tremor in her jaw returning. Cole moved to the door, set his hand on the latch, and let her see it. Open. Loose. "I said it before," he told her. "Chua Hongqua." She stared a moment longer, as if expecting him to turn the bolt when she looked away. But he didn't. The door stayed just as it was, resting easy against the frame. She breathed, shallow but freer. He poured coffee for himself, left a tin cup near her elbow. "It's bitter," he said. "Still warms a man." She took it with both hands. The rim touched her lip, and she closed her eyes for a heartbeat, as if the heat reminded her of something once familiar. A flash crossed her face. A kitchen, maybe. The smell of bread. A laugh that had turned sharp. She blinked, and the memory fell away. Cole stepped outside to check the corral. The night air was crisp, smelling of sage and cooling dust. His mare snorted softly, head turning toward the open road. Somewhere far off, a single hoofbeat echoed, then stopped. He looked out past the fence, seeing nothing but darkness stitched with faint starlight. The land was too wide for echoes like that to mean nothing. He stayed there a moment longer before going back in. Mira had dozed off in the chair, one arm over her middle. The lamplight softened her features, made her look younger, though the shadows beneath her eyes told stories she hadn't yet spoken. Cole covered her lightly with a folded blanket and turned the wick low. Before blowing out the flame, he looked once more at the door, its latch glinting faintly in the half-dark. He left it the way it was. Outside, the wind shifted again, eastward this time, carrying the dry scent of distance and the faintest rhythm of something moving across hard pan. Cole listened, then whispered into the quiet, "Not tonight." The night held its breath. The night lay deep and wide, stitched with cold stars. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, leaving only a dull red glow beneath the ash. The air smelled of pine resin and worn leather, faintly sweet, faintly tired. Mira woke before dawn, her ribs aching with each slow breath. The quiet pressed close, too heavy to trust. She sat up, eyes finding the door first. It stood ajar, just enough to let a slice of silver moonlight spill across the floorboards. Her pulse jumped. For a heartbeat, she thought of running. Just grab her boots, follow the open light until the sky widened. But something in that thin line of moonlight stopped her. It wasn't a trap. It was a choice. Barefoot, she crossed the room, each plank creaking like it remembered other steps. The night air slid in cool against her skin. Outside, the plains breathed slow, an endless hush broken only by the sigh of grass. She stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Above her, stars shimmered over the far hills, patient and distant. She closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, the darkness didn't feel like a cage. Behind her, the floorboards gave a soft groan. Cole's shadow filled the doorway. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. His voice came low, calm as creek water. "Can't sleep? Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." He leaned against the post, arms folded, face half in shadow. "The wind turns strange this time of night," he said softly. "Keeps most folks restless." She turned to look at him, one hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You ever wonder what's out there?" "Every day," he said. "Still haven't found a reason to leave it be." The silence between them wasn't sharp. It hung soft, uncertain, but not unkind. Mira's gaze drifted beyond the fence. The open land stretched black to the horizon, and somewhere in that distance, she could almost hear it. The rhythm that had followed her for days, the measured thud of hooves, the sound of pursuit she had taught herself to ignore. Her chest tightened. Cole noticed. "He's still looking for you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she asked quietly, "You ever lose something that keeps walking after you?" He took a long breath. "Lost plenty," he said. "Some things come back quiet. Some don't come back at all." She nodded, the truth of it settling heavy between them. Cole reached for the lantern hanging by the door, the one with soot climbing its glass, and lifted it by the handle. The light caught the rough planes of his face, the patience carved there by years of weather and solitude. "You can leave the door open," he said. "Nothing out here that won't announce itself first." Mira stepped back inside, the wood cool under her feet. The faint smell of smoke followed her in. She lay down on the narrow cot, her eyes tracing the ceiling beams. The lamp still burned in the next room, its glow barely reaching her. Her mind slipped sideways into memory. A flash of a hand gripping her wrist, of laughter that turned to command, of a door that had locked with the sound of finality. The echo of it lived somewhere deep inside her ribs. She turned on her side, facing the open space where the door should have been closed. This time it stayed open. She drifted between waking and sleep, aware of footsteps outside. The steady rhythm of a man checking the corral, of a horse shifting weight in the stall. Through the thin walls came a soft, uncertain sound. Juniper snorting once, then quieting, the jangle of her bridle tapping the post like a heartbeat. Mira's eyes fluttered open. She watched the lamplight tremble, thinking of the road she had walked to get here. It wasn't forgiveness she wanted, just stillness. Maybe that was enough. Outside, the wind carried something faint. One echo, one hoofbeat, far to the east. Cole paused by the fence, head turning toward the sound, every muscle drawn silent. The night was too deep to see who rode it, but the pattern of dust on the air told him. Someone was out there, close enough to smell the sage. He stayed still until the noise faded. When he went back in, Mira was asleep, her hand resting against the blanket as if testing the shape of rest. He looked once more at the latch, unchanged, untouched, and left it open. The last of the fire sighed out, leaving only the faint crackle of cooling wood. Outside, Juniper shifted, again, a low whicker in her throat, uneasy but alive. The stars hung on, cold and clear, watching over the open door. Dawn came pale and uncertain, the kind of light that had to fight its way through the dust before touching anything. A thin mist clung low over the grass, blurring the fences and softening the edges of the barn. The air smelled of dew that hadn't fully won against the dryness. From the porch, Cole watched the first rim of sun push over the ridge, the land catching gold, slow as breath. Inside, the sound of small movement. Cloth shifting, a chair creaking. Mira stepped out a moment later, wearing his spare shirt belted at the waist, sleeves rolled high. The color was faded denim, the kind that remembered other shoulders. Her hair was tied back unevenly, a few strands brushing her cheek. "Morning," Cole said, his voice still rough from sleep. She nodded, pulling the fabric tighter against the breeze. "Didn't mean to sleep in. Sun's early today." He poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. She hesitated, then took it, fingers brushing his for a second, just enough for warmth to pass between. They stood there in the silence of waking land, the wind carrying the faint sound of birds somewhere far off. After a while, she set the cup down and looked toward the barn. "I can help," she said. "With what?" "Whatever needs doing." Cole studied her. There was no defiance in the words, just the steady tone of someone who needed to belong somewhere, even if only by labor. "You sweep the floor," he said, faint amusement touching his mouth. "You'll raise half the county in dust." She almost smiled. "I'll start small." And she did. Inside the cabin, she found a broom, its handle worn smooth. The motion of sweeping came uneven at first, her ribs still stiff, but she kept at it. The rhythm calmed her. Each push of straw over the boards took a piece of yesterday with it. Cole worked outside, the sharp ring of his hammer marking time. He fixed a loose hinge on the gate, the smell of hot iron mixing with sun-warmed wood. From where he stood, he could see her through the open doorway, dust rising around her feet, her form moving slow but steady. The sight eased something in him he didn't know had been wound tight. By noon, she'd set the table right, wiped the counters, folded the blanket neatly. When she stepped out, the sun caught her just so, light glancing off her hair like copper in water. She squinted against the glare. "I didn't break anything," she said. "Then you're ahead of most folks." That small sound, half a laugh, half disbelief, was the first he'd heard from her that wasn't weary. Later, when the heat pressed hard on the land, Cole called out, "Best rest a while. Air's heavy." She leaned on the porch rail, looking toward the open range. "You live 15 miles from the nearest neighbor?" He nodded. "Closer to 16 if the wind's wrong." "That's a long way to be alone." "Not as long as some places," he said. And something in his tone made her look at him, seeing not distance but choice. Her gaze drifted to the corral. Juniper stood there, flank twitching under flies, tail flicking lazily. When Mira walked closer, the mare turned her head, eyes dark and cautious. Mira held out a hand, palm open, no words. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Juniper stepped forward, the soft brush of her muzzle touching Mira's fingers. Cole saw it from the porch. "She don't take to many," he said. "I don't push," Mira answered. He nodded once. "That's why." As afternoon fell into its slower rhythm, Mira sat by the doorway, mending the hem of her dress. Each stitch was small, precise. Cole worked by the fence, his shadow long and bent. The land had gone quiet again, the kind of stillness that carries its own sound. When the light began to cool, he came back in and poured her another cup of water. "You holding up?" She looked up, eyes softer than the night before. "It's strange," she said, feeling safe enough to hurt. Cole didn't speak, only nodded. The meaning was enough. The sun sank behind the ridge, turning the world the color of old brass. A wind stirred the tall grass, carrying dust across the horizon. Time 600 psalms. Cole glanced toward it, eyes narrowing. Out there, the faint outline of a wagon moved along the distant trail, just a smudge against the glow. Freight line, he muttered, mostly to himself. But the thought lingered. How far word could travel, how easy it was for trouble to follow a trail already made. He turned back to the porch. Mira had gone inside, the light of the lamp blooming faintly through the window. The sight eased him again, though the wind carried a smell he didn't like, iron, dry and sharp. The day folded into evening. Cole took the lamp outside and set it on the rail. Its glow reached the steps, catching the dust swirling in slow circles. He listened to the wind. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a rider would see that light and know there was life here. He stood there a long time, thumb brushing the warm handle of the lantern, before whispering to no one, "Let it stay quiet a while longer." Behind him, inside the cabin, Mira's shadow crossed the window, slow and steady. For tonight, the house had two lives breathing inside it. And far off, under the falling dusk, dust rose again, where the horizon met the road. By the time they hit the road to town, the sun had already burned the cool off the morning. The wagon creaked under the weight of empty barrels and burlap sacks, the horses' hooves striking the hardpan in steady rhythm. The trail stretched ahead in a pale shimmer, a road of dust and heat. Cole held the reins loose. Beside him, Mira sat straight, hands folded tight in her lap. She wore the mended dress, the green one clean now but faded near the hem. The wind teased a strand of hair across her cheek, and she let it stay. The smell of sun-baked earth mixed with the faint soap scent of the shirt she'd washed the night before. They passed the dry creek bed, the one where cottonwoods leaned like old men half asleep. Cole glanced sideways once. "Town's small," he said. "Won't take long." She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Small's fine." He didn't ask what she meant. He figured she'd had enough of people's questions to last her a lifetime. When the first rooftops came into view, Mira's shoulders tightened. She pulled her hands deeper into her lap, fingers working against each other, like she could hide inside the motion. The closer they got, the louder the world became. Wagon wheels on planks, dogs barking, voices trading the day's price of feed. After weeks of wind and silence, the noise felt too much. Cole drove them down the main street. On one side, the blacksmith's hammer rang out. On the other, a line of storefronts leaned against each other, paint flaking under sun. He stopped outside a squat wooden building with a hand-painted sign that read, "Whitlow and Sons General Store." Mrs. Whitlow stepped out from behind the counter as the bell above the door jingled. She was short, round, and sharp-eyed, her gray hair pinned up neat. "Well, Mercer," she said, "you remembered you need supplies after all." "Ran low," Cole said. "Need salt, flour, lamp oil." Mrs. Whitlow's gaze shifted past him to Mira, standing a step behind, half-shadowed by the doorway. Her expression softened without losing its edge. "You'll want coffee, too," she said lightly. "No man lives this far out and stays civil without it." Mira gave Finch a small nod, not sure if it was agreement or defense. Cole added, "And bandages." That earned a look, but Mrs. Whitlow said nothing. She moved around the counter, filling the order in practiced silence. Mira drifted between the aisles, eyes sliding over shelves of nails, seed packets, jars of penny candy. Her fingers brushed the edge of a flour sack, feeling the rough weave of burlap, solid, harmless. The door opened again. 2 women entered, the kind whose whispers had edges. Their talk stopped short when they saw Mira. One tilted her head, smiling without warmth. "Didn't know Mercer was hiring help." Cole's shoulders tensed, but his voice stayed calm. "Didn't know I had to clear it with you." The woman's smile faltered. "Just making conversation." "Then make it somewhere else." Mrs. Whitlow set the last tin on the counter with a loud thud. "Mercer, your total's there," she said, cutting through the silence. Mira's eyes were on the floor, color climbing her neck. Cole paid, gathered the parcels, and tilted his head toward the door. She followed without a word. Outside, the street buzzed with sun and motion. She kept her gaze ahead, but out of the corner of her eye, she saw a man leaning against a post by the smithy. A long coat, dust-colored, hat low enough to shade his face. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Cole felt her stiffen. He turned, saw the man, and for an instant their eyes met. Then the man looked away, spitting dust, like the moment hadn't meant anything at all. But Cole knew better. They climbed onto the wagon. Mira's fingers gripped the edge of the seat, knuckles white. "It's him?" Cole asked quietly. "I don't know." Her voice came out thin, strangled by fear she hadn't meant to show. "Could be." He flicked the reins. The wagon rolled forward, wood groaning. No one followed, but she didn't look back to check. Once they cleared the last house, the road opened wide again. Mira's breathing steadied by degrees, the color returning to her cheeks. The plains were waiting, endless and silent after. "A mile," Cole said. "People talk in town. Best not let it stick." "I don't care what they say." He gave her a sidelong look. "You will, if they mean to find out who you were." Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Who I was doesn't matter." "Maybe not to you," he said. "But men who make trouble don't need reason. Just a trail." The words hung between them, heavy as dust. The sun had slipped lower by the time the ranch came back into sight. Smoke from the chimney rose steady, as if nothing in the world had shifted. Cole slowed the horse, the wheels crunching soft over the dry ground. Mira let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For making you stand in front of them." Cole shook his head. "Wasn't the first time I've had to stand somewhere I didn't ask to." She looked at him then, and for a heartbeat, her eyes weren't guarded. They were grateful, raw, almost tender. The kind of look that says thank you without sound. The horse snorted, breaking the moment. As they pulled up to the porch, the last of the sunlight caught on the rim of the lamp still hanging by the door, turning it briefly to gold. Mira climbed down, her skirt catching the step. She didn't turn around, didn't look back toward the road. But Cole did. The man with the dust-colored coat was nowhere in sight. Still, the image of him lingered, the kind of face you don't forget, even if you try to. The air shifted as the sun sank. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried once, sharp against the quiet. Cole untied the horse, leading it to water, and thought of how some storms don't show themselves until they're already overhead. The next few days carried a quiet that didn't feel like peace. It was the kind of stillness that came before weather changed, when even the grass seemed to listen. The mornings broke pale, the sun rising red through thin dust. Cole worked near the house, mending a section of fence, oiling hinges, keeping himself close enough to hear the creak of the porch boards if Mira stepped outside. She'd begun tending to small things, washing, sweeping, collecting kindling. That afternoon, she brought a tin pail to the pump, her movement slow but sure. The rhythm of the handle squeaking up and down echoed across the yard. Water sloshed bright against metal, catching sunlight like glass. Cole watched her from the barn, pretending to check the harness straps. There was a steadiness to her now that hadn't been there before, a patience that made the air around her softer. Mira felt his eyes on her but didn't turn. She dipped her hands into the cold water, the sting waking something inside her chest, something alive. When she stood, the horizon tilted faintly with heat shimmer. Beyond it lay the road, always the road. By evening, the wind came from the south, dry and hot, carrying the smell of iron and far-off rain. Cole leaned on the porch rail, his shirt open at the collar, watching the sky fade from gold to copper. Mira sat on the steps below him, patching the edge of a torn apron. Her stitches were neater now. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked suddenly. Cole's eyes stayed on the distance. "I've thought about what'd happen if I did. And land wouldn't miss me much, but the fences might fall faster." She smiled, faint but real. "You talk like the land listens." "It does," he said. "You just have to stay long enough to hear it answer." Mira's hands paused on the fabric. The thought lingered. For years, she'd learned to keep moving, to never let one place know her name. But here, the ground seemed to remember her footsteps. Even Juniper's ears had stopped flicking whenever she walked by. As night crept in, the temperature fell. The air thickened with the smell of smoke from the stove. Mira stood, brushing off her skirt, and walked to the corral. Juniper shifted restlessly, nostrils flaring. The mare's belly was rounder now, her breath heavier. Mira laid a hand on the warm flank. "Easy, girl," she whispered. The animal's skin quivered under her palm, but didn't shy away. Cole joined her, the lantern casting amber light across the stall. "She's due soon," he said quietly. Mira looked up at him. "You think she knows?" "Most creatures do." He leaned on the post beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched, but didn't. Outside the barn door, the wind rattled a loose board, then fell still. Mira broke the silence first. "That man in town," she said, "the one watching us, do you think he'll come?" Cole's jaw tightened. "If he means to, he'll wait until he thinks I've stopped watching." She met his eyes. "You haven't." "Not yet." Her hand stayed on the horse, fingers tracing the rise and fall of its breath. "If he does come," she said softly, "I don't want you to fight for me." Cole's gaze shifted toward the dark road beyond the fence. "Don't worry," he said after a pause. "I won't fight for you." He looked back at her. "I'll stand with you." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. Not with fear, but with an ache she didn't have a name for. They walked back toward the cabin together. The lantern's flame threw their shadows long across the yard. The air was thick and dry, the kind that made the throat ache when you swallowed. Cole felt it pressing against him. The same weight that comes when a storm waits just over the horizon. When they reached the porch, he paused and looked west. The wind had died entirely, and the sky had gone the color of bruised steel. He could smell something faint beneath the dust. A sweetness gone sour. The scent of distant rain mixed with heat. Mira followed his gaze but saw only emptiness. "It's too still," she murmured. "Yeah," he said. "That's how trouble moves. Quiet first." They stood there a long time, the boards creaking under their weight. Inside, the lamp burned steady, golden and small. It made the shadows at the edge of the room look deeper, like the house itself was holding its breath. When Mira finally went in, Cole stayed on the porch, one hand on the post. Far away, almost too faint to tell, came the sound of hooves, steady, deliberate, unhurried, the kind of gait that belonged to a man who already knew the road. He didn't move, just listened, until the sound dissolved into the wind. Then he whispered, "Let him ride as long as he can." But even as he said it, he knew the waiting had already begun. The day came up white hot, the kind of noon that stripped all color from the world. The air shimmered above the plain, bending light into waves. Cole was out by the barn, shirt damp with sweat, fixing the hinge on a gate that didn't need fixing, hands moving just to keep them busy. The hammer rang against metal, a sound too sharp for the stillness. Then Juniper lifted her head. Her ears pricked toward the road, nostrils flaring. Cole froze, feeling the change in the air before he heard it. A distant rhythm, measured, deliberate, grew out of the horizon. Hoofbeats. Mira stepped onto the porch, one hand shading her eyes. The sun struck her face, bleaching it pale. "Someone's coming," she said. Cole didn't answer. He set the hammer down, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked toward the fence. By the time he reached the gate, the figure was close enough to make out. Tall in the saddle, dark coat despite the heat, posture straight and practiced. The kind of man who'd spent too long believing the land owed him something. Barrett Sloane. He reined in just short of the gate, dust rising around his horse's legs. His smile was thin, without warmth. "Afternoon, Mercer," he called. "Fine place you got here." Cole rested one hand on the top rail. "Ain't much, but it holds." Sloane's gaze slid past him to the porch. Mira stood there motionless, her hands gripping the railing. The look that crossed his face wasn't surprise. It was ownership. "You've done some running, Bella," he said, "but you know better than to think you could hide." Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "My name's Mira now." "That so?" He dismounted slow, boots crunching over dry earth. "You forgot who you belong to?" Cole's stance shifted, still casual, but the line of his shoulders hardened. "You might want to leave that talk on the road, friend." Sloane's smile didn't move. "You taking her side? Don't even know what she is." "Don't need to," Cole said. "She's under my roof. That's enough." The words hung in the heat. The horse snorted. A hawk crushed far off, too high to see. Sloane took another step forward, his coat brushing the dust. "She's mine, Mercer. Paper or no paper, she knows it." Mira's voice came then, quiet but clear. "Belonging to you meant bruises where no one could see. Meant sleeping with one eye open." She paused, breath shuddering. "That's over." Sloane's jaw twitched, but he laughed. A dry, brittle sound. "You got no proof of anything." Cole's hand stayed on the gate. His tone was level, even softer than before. "Don't need proof, just a choice. And she's made it." Sloane stared at him for a long time, the light catching the edge of his cheekbone, sharp as flint. His eyes flicked from Cole to Mira and back again, measuring the ground he'd have to cross to reach her. The distance wasn't much, but something in Cole's stillness told him it would be too far. Finally, Sloane spat into the dust, the sound harsh in the silence. "This ain't finished," he said, swinging into the saddle. Cole didn't move. "Then you best come ready to finish it right." Sloane turned his horse with a flick, the animal's hooves pounding against hardpan. Dust rose and hung in the air long after he'd gone. The echo of it stayed, heavy as the heat. Mira sank onto the porch step, one hand pressed to her ribs, the other gripping the rail until her knuckles went white. Cole walked to her slowly, boots crunching over the dry earth. "You all right?" She nodded, but her breath caught halfway. "I thought if I ran far enough." She stopped, eyes fixed on the empty road. "He's not coming back today," Cole said. She looked at him, searching his face for something she couldn't name. "And if he does?" Cole's voice was quiet but sure. "Then he'll have to get past me again." Something inside her loosened. Not relief exactly, but the release that comes when a person realizes they don't have to keep running alone. The air shifted. The wind fell still. The sound of the hammer he'd dropped earlier echoed in his mind, a hard note that wouldn't stop ringing. He reached down, picked it up, and hung it back on the hook by the barn door. Inside the cabin, the lamp waited unlit. Mira stepped in first, her bare feet soundless on the boards. Cole followed. pausing once to glance over his shoulder at the road. The dust was settling, slow and quiet, until the land looked untouched again. But he knew better. Trouble didn't always announce its return with sound. Sometimes it waited for nightfall. When he closed the door, the latch clicked soft, a sound like the end of a long breath. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing the grass flat for just a moment, before dying out completely. By the next afternoon, the heat had turned restless. Clouds gathered low and dark over the western ridge, the air swollen with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Every living thing seemed to brace for it. The horses stamping, the windmills whining faintly, the grass bending before the wind. Cole worked near the barn, fixing a feed latch he'd checked twice already, just to keep his hands moving. Mira watched him from the porch, her fingers twisting the hem of her apron, mind still echoing with the sound of Sloane's voice. Every word had pressed against her ribs like an old bruise waking up. When the first drop hit the porch rail, she looked up, startled. Then another followed, heavier, and another. Within seconds, the sky opened. "Get inside," Cole shouted. But she was already stepping off the porch, barefoot on the wet earth. The rain fell in sheets, cold and clean, striking her face like 1,000 tiny truths. Cole ran after her, catching her hand as the wind whipped around them. "You'll catch your death," he said, laughing despite himself. She turned toward him, hair plastered to her temples, eyes bright through the rain. "Feels like life," she said. He let go of her hand then, but didn't step back. For a long moment, they simply stood there, drenched and breathing, while the storm swallowed the world. The scent of wet sage rose thick from the ground, and lightning forked over the ridge, flashing white against the dark sky. Cole's hat dripped steady rivulets down his collar. He should have been thinking of the barn doors or the tack left in the open, but all he could see was her, head tilted to the rain, mouth curved into something close to peace. It wasn't joy exactly. It was the kind of release that comes after years of silence. When the wind shifted, he reached for her arm. "Come on," he said, voice roughened by the rain. "Let's get out of this." Inside the barn, the roof roared under the downpour. Mira wrung the water from her hair, shivering. Cole fetched a blanket from a tack trunk and set it over her shoulders. She clutched it close, eyes following the streaks of water running down the wood. "I used to hate storms," she said softly. "They always sounded like someone coming." He glanced toward her. "And now?" Her smile was faint but steady. "Now they sound like someone leaving." Outside, the wind shifted again, cooler now. Rain hammered the ground, turning dust to mud, washing the air clean. The mare in the stall gave a low, contented sound, flicking her ears toward them. Mira reached out, brushing Juniper's nose. The animal leaned into her touch. Cole leaned against a post, arms folded, the rain tracing patterns on the boards behind him. "Storm'll pass quick," he said. "I don't mind if it stays," she replied. For a moment, Neither spoke. The rhythm of the rain filled the gaps words would have spoiled. Then, without warning, Mira laughed. An unguarded sound, small but bright, breaking through the roar of the storm. It was raw, surprised, as though she'd forgotten how laughter worked. Cole looked at her, startled first, then smiling. "What's funny?" "Nothing," she said, still laughing. "And everything." The sound lingered, blending with the rain, softening the edges of the day. It was the first time he'd heard her voice carry something other than caution. The kind of laugh that doesn't ask permission to exist. When the downpour finally thinned, they stood in the open doorway of the barn, the air thick with steam and petrichor. Water dripped from the eaves, running off the edge of the roof in long threads. The hills gleamed wet and new, as though the land itself had been rinsed clean. Mira's blanket had slipped to her elbows. She didn't pull it back up. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. "Maybe," Cole said, "but not tonight." Her hand found the post beside her, knuckles brushing his. "I hope he doesn't ruin this." "He can't," Cole answered. "Rain's done what it came to do." They watched the clouds break apart, the sun pushing faint through the mist. Out in the corral, Juniper shook her mane, droplets scattering like sparks. Mira looked down at her dress, mud climbing its hem. She didn't care. The damp fabric clung to her, heavy but honest, like proof of something survived. She caught Cole watching her and didn't look away this time. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full. The kind that settles when a storm leaves behind more than it takes. A breeze passed through the open door, carrying the scent of wet flowers. Mira smiled faintly. "They held," she said. "What did?" "The flowers by the porch." Cole nodded, the corners of his mouth curving. "Guess they learned from you." She laughed again, softer now, but real. As evening fell, they stepped out into the fading light. The land steamed under the last of the sun, every blade of grass trembling with water. Cole paused by the steps, looking west, where the sky glowed faintly gold beneath the clouds. Somewhere far away, thunder muttered one last time, then faded into nothing. Behind him, Mira's voice came quiet but sure. "Tomorrow will smell like new." He looked at her, at the light touching her face, and thought, maybe it already does. Far off, from the stall, Juniper's soft whinny rose through the cooling air. Low, calm, and strange, like the promise of something about to begin. The storm had washed the color back into the world. When dawn came, the air smelled new, like earth turned gentle again. The grass glistened, and the road into town shone pale under the rising sun. Cole hitched the wagon just after breakfast, the boards still damp with dew. Mira climbed up beside him without a word, her mended green dress folded neat over her knees. They rode in the easy quiet of morning. The wheels hummed over the soft ground, and Juniper's new foal, still wobbling on unsteady legs, watched them go from the corral, nose pressed against the fence. Mira glanced back once and smiled. "She's not afraid anymore." "Neither are you," Cole said. Mira didn't answer, but the warmth of his words followed her all the way to the edge of town. When they reached the first cluster of buildings, the difference was small but sharp. The air no longer carried the same brittle judgment as before. People still looked, but their eyes didn't cut. A few even nodded. The rain had scrubbed something clean. Not just the dust, but the whispers that had hung there. Mrs. Whitlow was sweeping her porch when they stopped. "Mercer," she greeted, wiping her hands on her apron. "And Miss Mira, good morning to you." Mira blinked. The name landed soft, like a hand placed gently on her shoulder. "Morning, ma'am," she said, the sound careful but sure. Mrs. Whitlow smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "We got in new cloth yesterday. Good cotton weave if you're mending still, and more coffee if you're running low." "We'll take both," Cole said. Inside, the store smelled of fresh flour and oiled leather. Tom Avery, the blacksmith's apprentice, was at the counter trading nails for sugar. He turned, gave a nod that wasn't shy this time. "Ma'am," he said to Mira, "Storm treated you kind?" "It did," she answered. "Left more than it took." He grinned at that and tipped his hat before stepping out. Mira ran her fingers along a bolt of fabric, pale blue, soft under her touch. She thought of sewing curtains for the kitchen window, maybe a tablecloth. She'd never owned something that could catch the light without fear of it being noticed. While Mrs. Whitlow tallied the order, Mira glanced out through the open door. The boardwalk was busier today. 2 cowhands unloading crates, a child chasing a stray chicken, an old man dozing under the awning of the saloon. Life went on, unbothered by their presence. For once, she wasn't the center of the room's silence. Cole paid, tucking the receipt into his pocket. As they loaded the wagon, Mrs. Whitlow called after them. "You take care now, both of you. This land's easier when you've got someone watching your back." Mira smiled faintly. "I think we do." The ride home was quiet but light. The wind had softened, the smell of rain still clinging to the sage. Mira turned her face to it, letting the breeze lift the hair at her temples. Halfway down the trail, she spoke without looking at him. "You ever think about marrying again?" Cole's hands tightened on the reins. The question came gentle but heavy, like a pebble dropped in still water. "Not much use thinking on things that don't fit the life you've got," he said after a moment. "Maybe it fits better than you think." He looked at her then, steady, cautious, the way a man might look at a horizon he's not sure is safe to ride toward. "You asking?" She shook her head, a small smile tugging her mouth. "Just wondering if you'd thought about it." He didn't answer. The road stretched long and quiet between them. The leather creaked, the wheels clicked in rhythm with the horse's stride. Finally, he said, "Some things don't need thinking. They just wait until you're ready to see 'em." Mira's smile deepened, but she turned her gaze forward again. In the distance, the hills rose clean after the rain, green returning at their edges. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun hung low, washing the plains in gold. Mira carried the fabric inside, laid it on the table, and ran her palm over it once more, testing its softness like she still couldn't believe it was hers. Cole set the sacks near the stove, the smell of coffee beans filling the small space. When he looked up, she was at the window, the new cloth pooled in her hands, light pouring through it. For the first time, she looked like she belonged to the day, not just surviving it. Cole leaned against the doorframe. You thinking what I'm thinking? I don't know, she said. Depends if you're thinking about the future. He smiled at that. Small, quiet, but enough. Outside, the horizon shimmered with the last breath of daylight. The air was calm, the world finally holding still. But in the calm, something moved. A pulse, faint but real, the kind that comes before another turn in the trail. Cole's gaze lingered on Mira, on the light she held without meaning to. The thought came uninvited, as steady as his heartbeat. Maybe it's time. Morning came clean and bright, the kind of light that made everything look freshly made. A soft breeze moved through the yard, carrying the smell of soap and wet cloth. White shirts and towels fluttered along the clothesline, snapping lightly in the wind like quiet applause. Mira stood among them, a wooden basket at her feet, clothespins between her fingers. Cole stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped a moment to watch her. The way she moved, slow, deliberate, calm, had a rhythm that seemed to settle the air itself. The sunlight caught her hair, and for a second, she looked almost unreal, like a memory he hadn't lived yet. Morning, he said, walking closer. She turned, smiling faintly. You're up early. Old habit. He nodded toward the shirts. You keep this up, I'll have to buy more just to give you something to do. Her laugh was quiet, still finding its way into the open. Then I'll mend them before you do. The breeze tugged at the line again, sending the fabric brushing softly between them. Cole reached up, took one of the shirts by the hem, and let it flutter loose. The movement broke whatever space still lingered between their words. Mira, he said, voice lower now. Stay. She looked at him, unsure she'd heard right. I have, she said softly. No, he said, shaking his head. I mean stay for good. With me. The air seemed to still. The sound of the cloth snapping faded. Only the wind remained, faint and warm. He wasn't a man who dressed words fancy, and he didn't try now. I don't have much to offer, he said, eyes steady on hers. Just a roof that doesn't leak and a life that don't run from itself. But it's yours if you want it. She didn't speak right away. Her fingers worried the edge of a towel, the simple motion keeping her grounded. You want a wife? I want you, he said. The rest is just what comes with it. Her gaze drifted past him, to the fields washed in light, to the small cabin with its open door. And if I say yes, what happens to me? To the name I carried here? You keep it, he said without pause. You keep whatever's yours. I'm not asking you to trade it. Something in her face shifted, something like disbelief breaking into tenderness. You'd let me keep Valdez? It's who you were, he said, and who you are. Can't love one without the other. The wind caught a corner of the sheet beside her, pressing it against her arm. She closed her eyes for a moment, the fabric warm from the sun, the weight of his words settling over her like that. Gentle, inevitable. When she opened them, she nodded once. Then yes, she said, but I stay as Mira Valdez. That's exactly how I want you. He smiled, small but steady, the kind that made the world around him stop trying so hard. For a heartbeat, everything felt quiet and right. The wind, the shirts, the far-off hum of bees in the grass. Mira reached for another clothespin, her fingers trembling a little. Guess I should start washing more, she said. Why's that? Can't hang a new life on an empty line. He laughed, the sound low and easy. I'll get you more line then. They stood there together, the wind playing between them, the scent of clean cotton and coffee drifting from the house. The horizon lay clear, still damp from the last rain. For once there was no weight behind them, only the road ahead, waiting without threat. When Cole reached out, she didn't flinch. His hand brushed her cheek, rough and sun-warm, leaving a trace of dust and care. Welcome home, Mira Valdez, he said. She leaned into his palm just slightly. It already feels like it. Juniper whinnied from the barn, restless. Cole turned his head toward the sound. She's uneasy, he murmured. She's close, Mira said. I can tell. Then we'd best keep an eye on her tonight. They shared a look that said more than thanks or promise could. The light shifted across the yard, gold deepening toward afternoon. A cloud drifted past, shading the laundry for a moment. And when the sun came back, the air felt warmer somehow, like the land itself had approved. Behind them, the horizon shimmered faintly, as though something new was stirring under it. And somewhere in the barn, Juniper gave a low, full breath, the kind that comes before birth or change. The night fell slow and thick, carrying a hush that felt almost sacred. The plains stretched wide and silver under the moon, the grass dark at its roots, whispering in the soft wind. Inside the barn, the air was close and heavy with the scent of hay and sweat and rain-damp earth. The lantern burned low, its wick flickering in the draft that slipped through the gaps in the boards. Juniper shifted again, her hooves scraping the floor, the sound dull and tired. Mira was kneeling beside her, one hand on the mare's flank, feeling each tremor roll through muscle and bone. The heat of it pulsed through her palm. Her dress was streaked with dust and straw, hair pulled loose from its braid. Yet her eyes stayed calm, fixed on the animal's shuddering breaths. Cole stood in the half-shadow by the doorway, sleeves rolled to his elbows, shirt clinging to the sweat along his arms. He'd been there for hours, fetching water, towels, clean rags. Anything Mira asked for, he brought without question. Each time she looked up, his steady figure was there, solid as the beam holding the barn itself. She's been laboring a long while, he said softly. His voice carried no fear, only the kind of quiet that men use when they've seen enough hard things not to speak too soon. Mira nodded, still working. She's close now. I can feel it. She's just tired. Juniper groaned, her head low, flanks tightening again. Mira leaned closer, whispering to her. Words so gentle they barely stirred the air. Easy, girl. Easy now. You're not alone. Cole came closer, crouched beside her, and poured clean water into a shallow pan. His hands were rough but careful, the way a man's hands learn to be when he's spent his life mending more than breaking. She trusts you, he said. Mira gave a small smile. Maybe she knows I've been where she is. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. The truth in her tone said enough. For a while, the only sounds were breath and straw, and the rhythmic creak of the lantern swaying overhead. Then, at last, a movement. Small, then sudden. The tension broke like a held note released. Mira caught the newborn foal as it came, its body slick and trembling, its first breath caught between life and silence. Got you, she whispered. You're all right. You're here. Cole watched her work. The way her hands moved with purpose, how her voice stayed low and certain. The foal's chest fluttered once, then again. Mira rubbed it with a coarse cloth, steady and sure, until finally a weak sound escaped the little throat. A soft bleat, uncertain but alive. Mira laughed, quiet and astonished, and Cole felt something shift inside him, something that had been locked too long. He's breathing, she said, voice shaking. Cole leaned down, resting one hand lightly on the foal's flank. Strong one, he murmured. Juniper whickered softly, reaching toward her newborn. Mira stepped back just enough to let the mare nuzzle it clean, tears streaking her cheeks without her noticing. Cole saw them glint in the lantern light, and he didn't speak. Some moments didn't need words to hold their meaning. The foal tried to stand, legs skittering awkwardly against the straw. Mira wiped her hands, breathless, then crouched again, guiding it with a gentle push under the chest. Come on, she whispered. You can do it. The foal trembled, knees buckling, then caught itself. For one unsteady heartbeat, it stood, thin, fragile, but upright. Mira laughed again, that bright, disbelieving sound that made the whole barn feel lighter. Cole smiled. Didn't think he'd find his feet so soon. He just needed to be told he could, she said. They stayed there in silence while the world outside moved on without them. The night hummed low and alive. The wind brushed the barn walls like a slow breath. Mira leaned her shoulder against the stall door, exhaustion softening her posture. But her face held peace, the first true peace Cole had seen there. After a time, she turned to him, level, moderate. It's strange, she said. All the hurt I carried feels smaller now, like it burned itself out. He studied her in the soft light. Maybe it didn't burn out, he said. Maybe it just found somewhere better to rest. She met his gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. The foal suckled quietly, Juniper's head bent close. Mira reached out, brushed the mare's neck with her fingertips. "She's a good mother," she said. "So are you," he replied before he could stop himself. Her eyes flicked to his, startled, but she didn't argue. "Not yet," she said, "but I'm learning how to keep something alive again. That's a start." He nodded, the corner of his mouth softening. That's all it ever takes. Outside, the thunder rolled again, low and distant now, more like memory than threat. The smell of rain still hung in the air, rich and grounding. Cole moved to hang the lantern on the wall, its light stretching long across the straw. "You ought to rest," he said. "I will," she murmured. "Just want to watch a little longer." He stayed beside her, not pressing. The two of them stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the newborn breathe. The rhythm of it, small, uneven but certain, filled the space around them like a promise. Mira's voice came soft after a while. "Do you ever think the land remembers?" He turned to her. "Remembers what?" "The people who healed on it. The ones who stayed." Cole thought for a long moment before answering. "If it does, it remembers through what grows." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it'll remember this night." He looked at her, at the glow on her face, at the soft wildness that the light brought out in her eyes. "I reckon it will." When the foal finally settled beside its mother, Mira exhaled a long, even breath, as though releasing something she'd been holding for years. She wiped her hands on her skirt and turned toward the door. "It's morning," she said quietly. Cole followed her outside. The air was cool, the sky still pale with the first touch of dawn. Across the plains, mist curled low to the ground, and every blade of grass glittered with dew. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge, but the promise of it warmed their faces. They stood there, side by side on the porch steps, looking out over the fields. Behind them, in the barn, Juniper gave a soft nicker, the sound of contentment. Mira smiled at the sound, eyes bright with unshed tears. Cole set the lantern down on the railing, flame flickering out in the morning breeze. "You did good, Mira," he said quietly. "We did," she corrected. He chuckled. "Reckon that's true." The world around them woke slow, the distant cry of a hawk, the shuffle of cattle, the faint rustle of the prairie stretching itself awake. Mira leaned against the post, arms folded loosely. "Feels like everything's breathing at once," she said. "That's the kind of morning worth keeping," Cole replied. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think things like this happen twice? The chance to begin again?" He didn't answer right away. The wind lifted his hair, carrying the smell of wet earth and hay. "Maybe not twice, he said finally. "Maybe just once when you're ready to notice." Her eyes softened. "Then I guess I noticed." The first rim of the sun broke the ridge, painting the barn in gold. Mira's face glowed in it, warm and alive. She took his hand, rough, solid, real, and held it without fear. The foal cried once from inside, a bright sound against the hush. Mira looked back, smiling, level moderate. He's found his voice. Cole squeezed her hand gently. So have you. And in that quiet, bright hour, the world seemed made new again, like it had waited for them both to arrive before turning the page. Morning rose clean and golden, the kind of light that softened every hard thing it touched. Cole hitched the wagon outside the barn while Mira brushed Juniper's mane, whispering something gentle to calm her. The foal pressed close to its mother, unsteady but curious, as if sensing a change in the air. "You sure about this?" Cole asked, straightening his collar. Mira smiled, adjusting the hem of her green dress. "If I wasn't, you'd know." They rode toward town in easy silence. The sky stretched wide, blue as promise, and the wheels hummed steady on the road. By the time the church came into view, a small white building at the edge of the plains, the world already felt lighter. Mrs. Whitlow stood waiting on the porch, hands on her hips, grin wide as morning. "Took you long enough," she teased. "Some things take their time," Cole said. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and sun-warmed wood. The pastor, quiet, kind-eyed, greeted them with a nod. Tom Avery waited near the front, holding two small silver rings that gleamed unevenly, handmade, hammered with care. "They're rough," Tom said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But they'll hold." Mira smiled. "That's all anything needs to do." The ceremony was short, simple words, steady voices. When the pastor asked, Cole met Mira's gaze. "I already chose her," he said. Mira's eyes softened. "And I choose you." No tremor, no doubt. Outside, sunlight spilled over the church steps, bright enough to make them squint. Mrs. Whitlow hugged Mira tight, whispering something about second chances. Tom tipped his hat, pretending not to wipe his eyes. The wagon ride home was quiet. Mira's hand rested on Cole's sleeve, her touch light but certain. "Feels strange," she said, "like I've been walking toward this for a long time without knowing it." "Maybe you have," he said. The cabin waited at the edge of the Somme prairie, small and golden in the afternoon light. Smoke curled from the chimney, the air warm with the scent of coffee and baked bread. Mira stepped inside first, carrying her bouquet, wild daisies and one small bluebell from the patch she'd planted. She set them in the chipped mug on the table, the same one that had once held water for her trembling hands. Cole stood in the doorway, hat in hand, watching her. "Never thought this place could look so alive," he said. She turned, eyes shining. "You just needed someone to see it with you." He crossed the room and kissed her forehead. "The door's still open," he murmured. "It should stay that way," she said. Evening came soft and gold. They sat on the porch, boards warm beneath their boots, the light sliding slowly across the yard. The foal stumbled near the fence. Juniper nudged it back upright. Mira laughed quietly, resting her head against Cole's shoulder. "You ever think he'll come back?" she asked, voice barely above the rustle of grass. "No," Cole said simply. "Some men ride off and never look back." That's their burden, not ours. Mira nodded. Then I'll stop listening for him. The silence between them was full of small sounds, the windmill creaking, the soft snort of horses, the hush of the world settling in. Feels like peace, she said. It is, Cole answered. Finally. The first stars appeared, faint against the blue dusk. The air cooled, carrying the faint scent of sage and dust. Mira turned her face toward him. Sometimes, you don't know where home is until someone tells you you can stay. He met her gaze, eyes steady. You can stay. I know, she breathed and smiled. A faint nicker came from the corral, followed by the light shuffle of hooves. The world felt whole in that sound, like the land itself was exhaling. Cole reached for her hand, their fingers lacing together with quiet certainty. Tomorrow, he said, I'll mend the west fence. She smiled, eyes half closed. And I'll make breakfast worth coming back to. He chuckled. Then we'll be all set. Above them, the stars gathered in clusters, soft and bright. The wind stirred the curtains inside, and the flowers on the table trembled gently in their mug. Every small thing in that cabin, every breath, every creak, felt alive with the same quiet truth. They had endured, and they had found their place. When Mira leaned closer, the last of the day's light caught her hair, turning it to gold. Cole wrapped an arm around her, and the two of them sat in stillness as the prairie went dark. For the first time in years, he felt the land wasn't just something he worked. It was something he shared. And that, he thought, was enough, narrator. And so, dear friends, that's how Cole and Mira found something far stronger than luck. Peace. Out there on the wide plains, they built not just a home, but a life shaped by kindness, patience, and quiet understanding. It's a reminder that love doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes softly, like dawn light on the porch, steady, gentle, and true. If this story touched your heart, tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing from folks who've lived enough life to recognize the kind of love that grows slow and stays strong. Leave a comment. Share what this story meant to you or a memory that still warms your heart. And if you'd like to keep wandering these Western trails with me, please click like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you'll know when the next story rides in. Every week, we share new Western tales, stories of courage, second chances, and the kind of love that never quits. Until next time, may your days be calm, your coffee hot, and your heart steady as the sunset over the open plains.